Gagan, and I'm with MainStreetMediaUtah.com. Tonight's a very exciting podcast as we will be interviewing Tracie Halvorsen, Dr. Richard Fleming, and Jim Gagan. And we'll be interviewing on SB54 and the RICO lawsuit. But before we get started, and I bring them into the room, I just have a few words that I would like to speak to all of our listeners. So we catch ourselves waiting for someone else to make the first move, for someone else to make the change, and for someone else to rescue us. However, no hero is coming. You are the weapon. You have to build it and shatter the status quo. Hustle devours waiting and spits out legends. So why would we leave our future on waiting for something that may or may not happen if we are just waiting? We may be extremely busy, but that means we're still waiting. We may be in denial, but we're still waiting. Or we may be in a pattern of waiting. Of course, there are times when we need to have patience and just wait. Hebrews 6:12 says, "We do not want you to become lazy, but to imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what has been promised." And that is our freedom. Things just don't happen by themselves. We have to do something. We have to make it positive. We have to make sure we're doing something to move it forward. But don't wait any longer. Do something, not only for your sake, but for the sake of your children and the sake of your grandchildren. You must do it today. Abraham Lincoln said, "Things may happen to those who wait, but only the things left by those who hustle." So we're going to bring in Tracie, Dr. Fleming, and Jim Gagan. Howdy.
Hi, Laurie.
Hi there. How are ya?
Good.
Good evening, everyone.
All right. Well, I'm excited. So let's get started. But before we get started, Dr. Fleming, in short, can you just let our listeners know why you are qualified with your credentials? They'll find out why during on the amicus, but what are your credentials?
Well, I think first I'm somebody who can rationally explain to the court what needs to be going on in the court's mind as they're reviewing the case. That's what an amicus brief is, a friend of the court. I don't think you necessarily would need to be an attorney, a JD, to do that, although I'm a PhD, a physicist, an MD, a nuclear cardiologist, and an attorney. And that gives me a little bit of a broader spectrum to kind of look at a number of issues, whether that be scientifically, medically, or legally. And in this instance, Ms. Halvorsen is attempting to deal with problems that you have in Utah by stepping forward and doing what Benjamin Franklin suggested indirectly to the woman who asked him, "What form of government are you giving us?" And he very clearly said, "I'm giving you a republic, madam, if you can keep it." And Tracie is trying to help, at least in Utah, for you to keep that. And when I look at somebody doing that, and then I look at people playing on both sides to their advantage, saying that you can't have it both ways doesn't law degree, but it helps to have one to just simply a very brief amicus brief to say, listen, there's law now in California that suggests that the courts have looked at this issue of political determinants like SB54 law, and the people in Utah used it the opposite direction. And if the courts are saying it's okay to use it in one way but not another, somebody should step forward just politely and say, "Your Honors, I realize that there may be differences of opinion, but there's information here that really should be looked at least deeply enough that you can do your job conscientiously. And so, as an attorney, I guess I felt compelled to do something about that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So Tracie, let's get started. So this is a 4-part question. And if you can just remember, like, answer it so that our average citizens like me can understand it. Someone who doesn't really understand all the political jargon or the legal jargon that like you and Dr. Fleming and Jim do. So 4-part question. Why did you file this lawsuit at the federal level? Why is this a class action? And what does class action mean? In simple terms, what does RICO mean for people who aren't familiar with politics, but find a need to want to be a part of the class action? So give our listeners a quick overview of the case so that average Utahns like myself can understand.
So we filed, there's a group of us that filed a lawsuit in federal court. And the reason why it's in federal court is because the constitutional freedoms that have been taken from Utahns, and it's actually harming the entire United States. Here in Utah, we have a caucus convention system, which you meet in March and elect your neighbors and who are delegates. Then they go on to a convention and pick your party nominee or your nominee. You're nominating to a ballot.
Okay.
And that system is being subverted by signature gathering process. And the reason why I filed this lawsuit is because the law doesn't say they can force a signature gathering upon a party like they are. It just says that a party could be designed that way, but the Republican Party doesn't do this. And the reason why this harms everybody is because we even have a non-Republican that's on the suit. It's an unaffiliated, because people have that right to associate at any time in the process. If an unaffiliated thinks the Republican Party is just so corrupt, which it is in Utah, but I'm a party member, by the way, but it is, they can sit out and wait till that person gets out of the convention and they're like, oh, they're nominated to the general ballot, then we are going to associate with them at that time and vote for them. So it harms everybody. We have a plaintiff that is not a voter. He abstains from voting because he thinks the system is broken, and that is his right. But even though he abstains from voting, he still has the right and the constitutional rights to have a system that actually works. So that's why it's a class action. Anybody can join. It impacts a United States Senate seat. That was not, we have a person there that was disqualified during the convention process. Spencer Cox was disqualified through the convention process. So a lot of people ask, isn't this overturning an election? No, it's not, because an election never happened. Not a legal one, not a lawful one.
So let me back up a second. Can you explain why Curtis and Cox were disqualified at the convention?
Yeah, so it's a state delegated primary convention is what it is. The state delegates this primary because the state has the right to say, hey, party, you have to pick your nominee before you finally get to the general ballot. They can require that, and that's a primary, which the convention process is a primary. It's a state delegated primary.
Okay.
So when we went to convention under the internal nominating procedures of the Utah Republican Party, if you get 60% or more, you go directly to the ballot, the general ballot. You don't have to go to a primary, you're nominated to the general ballot. If you don't get 60%, if candidates don't get 60% or more, then the top two are nominated to a final primary ballot, which is the state issued ballot where the Republican Party, the whole party chooses. So Cox and John Curtis, Spencer Cox and John Curtis, were eliminated because two candidates got 60% or more, and that was Phil Lyman and Trent Staggs. They were nominated to the general ballot. What happened was Deidre Henderson usurped her authority. She was only supposed to take the names that were certified by the qualified political party, that's the Utah Republican Party, and place those names on the which ballot that the party directs her to. But she usurped it and said, no, that there's a second chance for people that gathered signatures. And so she placed those candidates back onto a ballot and forced a second chance primary again, and then deemed herself and Cox and John Curtis the party nominee. So she created a counterfeit ballot and she put it in the mail.
Wow.
So this affects everybody, making it a class action, because what you're dealing with aren't just some people whose names you mentioned, but it's the very concept about how American citizens in Utah, Utahns, but people around the country, how they get to choose who they get to vote for.
Yeah.
And we saw a lot of games played during the last election. When Robert Kennedy Jr. was trying to get on the ballot, there were games that were played that prevented him from being able to get on the ballot, in which case people who wanted to vote for him, that ability, that right that they have was taken away from them. And so the reason why this is a class action, not only for the state of Utah, but other states, is because you're supposed to have the right as a U.S. citizen to vote for who you want to vote for. And when the game is rigged so that you can't do that, then your right has been taken away from you. And one of the important things for people to, I think, understand is that if you have somebody who changes the rules in the middle of a game, and I'm old enough that we used to have an expression, people would just take their ball and go home if they were losing, right? And then you couldn't play because there was no ball to play baseball with or basketball or anything else. And that's kind of what happened here. They got upset, they took their ball, and they went home and they said, we're not going to play anymore. We're not going to participate. You can't be a part of this anymore because I'm just going to stop it. And what's concerning for me, and I just want to make sure that, not knowing how much time we have, I get this across. What's concerning to me is that if you have people that are in elected offices, and they bend the rules to make certain that they continue to be in those offices, you need to realize that they're going to keep doing that because it's been successful. And once it's brought up legally, and the courts say, no, you can keep doing that, you should ask yourself the question, how is it that these people that are in office will ever not be elected? Because
Correct.
they've already demonstrated they'll change the game. And if the courts say, yeah, you can do that, and the people, we the people, don't stand up and say, wait a minute, this is not how we play this game. We don't just grab the ball and run away and just, manipulate the game. We have to do this in a fair way. And that's part of what the amicus brief really emphasized. There needs to be a fair way. And if there's not, then everybody listening to this and everybody not listening to this who should be, their rights have been taken away from them. And it's much more than just the people who did it. It's the fact that they did it and they're getting away with it, and people need to stop it. So I'll turn that back over.
And I'll add to that, Dr. Fleming, because I've had so many people tell me that, they took off work to go and vote Some of the votes weren't even counted because somehow they ended up getting lost. But they just said, we took off time. We lost money to go vote. And if your vote's not going to count as a Utah citizen.
This right to vote is a constitutional right.
Correct.
And if what they do is they do an end run to change the game, it's kind of like saying you've got an umpire, they call you out, they say strike three, you're out, and somebody comes in off the bench and says, you're out of here, umpire. I'm coming in. I'm going to change that, and I'm going to call it a ball, and they walk to first base. That's the same concept. Now, in one, it's a game. But in reality, politics is also a game, but it's a game about power, and it's a game that has consequence for everybody listening, because when you're in office and you have power and you can make laws and you can get money from people for laws that are passed and you can manipulate what's happening in your state, and then other people will look at you and say, well, we want to have a good life too, so tell us what rules we need to follow to live a comfortable life in your state. Well, is that fair for everybody else who wants to do it the correct way and doesn't want to, the term is brown nose people, right? To get
Right.
what they want. But you're legitimizing, the system is currently legitimizing brown nosing and manipulation. And there are all sorts of good people out there that are listening to this who are probably thinking it didn't affect me. Well, it does affect you because it affected your right to vote. It affects your future. It affects your children's future because, like Walking Tall in the movie, when he stands there and he looks at the court, at the jury, and he says, if you allow them to do this to me, when he was running for sheriff, and then he rips open his shirt to show his bruises, then you give them the eternal right to do the same damn thing to any one of you. And if you don't get actively involved, you are legitimately allowing these people the right to do this over and over and over again. Because if you will not stand up to a bully, if you will not stand up and say this must be done fair, independent upon who's being elected in the process, it's the process of, are we going to do this fair in the United States and in Utah, which last I looked is still in the United States, or are we going to decide that we're going to have a free-for-all and whoever's in power can manipulate the rules, and that makes you a real king, and that means that everybody who allows that to happen has surrendered their sovereign rights and have accepted to become the new slave class of the country, and that's what will happen.
And that's what's happened in Utah. It's more egregious because the lieutenant governor, she's over her own race. She's deciding who the monarchy is, and it's whoever this special elite class wants to pick, and whoever will run the same bills that they want that will benefit their businesses. So
your mechanism of explaining how a candidate is selected in Utah by this dissociated SB54, where other states in California are making other rulings on the opposite of it. The reality here is that what just happened is they ran a race, and instead of having to run a mile for a mile race, they changed their finish line to a half mile, and were able to cross it and said, well, we win because we crossed the finish line. We got what we needed to run in the race. And we arbitrarily changed it because we have the power and authority to change the rules. And they did it for them differently than they did it for other candidates. And that's exactly what the second amicus is about, which is reflecting on the fact that you have Californian law saying something different now than Utah law about how these laws are enacted and who can run for office. And when you do that, you don't have consistent rights across nations. And that's what the second amicus said is, Your Honors, you need to look at this because we have SB54 has to be looked at by what's called strict scrutiny.
Right.
And strict scrutiny is the tightest of conditions. And the people don't have to become an attorney to understand that. Really, all strict scrutiny says is that there really has to be a compelling reason for it. People cannot be harmed as a result of it, and there can't be another way to get to the end goal, right?
Agreed. And we're going to cover that amicus
Yeah.
here. But,
Can I just interject something? The case that you filed, I think a lot of people will say, okay, so the GOP had their rule, but state law circumvented it. So my question to you, Tracie, is what or how were the signatures gathered and certified, and who was able to look at them to verify that enough signatures were collected?
So you notice that Dr. Fleming talked about a case in California because it's opposite of how this has been applied. What people don't know is SB54 was neutered in 2015. It doesn't force the signature gathering upon the party. That's just the way they're applying it. That's why these rulings came out and said, there's nothing wrong with this election law. It's constitutional because it doesn't say what they're doing. It doesn't say that the party has to accept signature gathering. It actually says a party can be designed either or both. It doesn't say you have to have it. But what Cox did in 2015, he said he didn't care what the law said. He was going to force the signature gathering and he was going to put them on the ballot. Because the only way that when the original SB54, what it allowed is it allowed the unaffiliated voter to vote in the Republican primary. So it was a quasi-jungle primary, and that allowed a signature gatherer to then get on the ballot. But in 2015, that was ruled unconstitutional. So in 2016, Bramble and McKay went back in and closed that and removed that ability. So that is the crux of this whole case is they cheated. They blatantly broke the law.
Tracie, I have a question. Can you explain signature gathering? Because again, people who aren't following politics and don't even understand what SB54, what do you mean by that? And is there money involved in this so-called signature gathering?
Yeah, the oligarchs, that's what I call them, of Utah. It's the richest people here. It's the Mitt Romney families. It's the Gail Miller family. They push this signature gathering as a way to confuse the people. It's a vehicle to confuse everybody, but they claim that you can gather signatures to access the Utah Republican Party primary ballot, but that is not true. It originally did that, but it got repealed for say with HB 48, which we can go through later, but the law doesn't say that. So what they're doing is they're going to these signature gathering companies and they pay them like anywhere from $700,000 to over $1 million to gather signatures. And it's all fake. They didn't even get the numbers. So they fraud the fraud. So it's all fake. Then they furthered the scheme and centralized the review of the state offices. So you got Davis County up there saying he's going to review all the state ones. Well, the law doesn't say that too. They broke it again because it's supposed to be reviewed like a statewide initiative. And I have run a statewide initiative before, and those packets that are reviewed or circulated within that district or in that county, those county clerks are supposed to review it. It's not to be centralized. So again, these kings and queens usurp their authority to create the fraud. And so you'll learn that you don't even have the
One of the things that I would like to add is that since SB 54 took effect, 5 times it's been used successfully to overturn the convention's wishes, or put them on, put them on the ballot. Cox, out of the 5, Cox was 2 of them.
Right.
2020 and 2024. Derek Brown, John Curtis, and Mitt Romney were the others.
So
Yeah,
it's kind of like, Tracie, would this be correct? It's kind of like Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson, just kind of took everything and all the delegates' votes and just threw them in the garbage.
That's exactly what she did. She disenfranchised everybody's votes. And it's not just the delegates, it's your neighbors that voted for you to be a delegate. She disenfranchised it.
Right.
So it's a representative form of government, which is guaranteed by the United States government. And that's why we've asked for the United States government to be joined in as a plaintiff, because they guaranteed us a representative form of government, and our state is stealing it from us.
And I think part of what Jim was emphasizing there is that the people counting the votes, supposedly, were the people benefiting by counting the votes, and they've never had to show for transparency the votes. So if you're the one responsible for counting the votes, the scenario that has developed is, well, of course we got enough votes. Oh, and we don't have to show you. Take our word for it. We got enough votes. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly.
So even if they hadn't, or even if they had, listen, if they had, you would think they would want to gladly open the books and say, here's my proof. Okay.
Right.
Ha,
But
ha,
it
ha.
was
But in
all
reality,
just an act.
when they don't do
But-
that, it
but I mean,
raises.
And why
If
would we even continue to do the conventions? Why would the state delegates say, listen, I mean, I was there and that went to well over midnight.
Yeah.
And why would you even want to continue if they're just going to steal it through SB54?
Right. So the general
And
public,
I also think that if
the general public
I
needs
was
to
gonna-
be, I'm sorry, Jim. The general public needs to be on board with this and say, listen, if we're going to have a set of rules, let's at least have a set of rules and abide by them. But let's not keep changing the rules throughout the game to favor the person changing the rules, because that's what you've got. I think most people would agree. Fair and honest, consistent. Jim, please, I didn't mean to interrupt there.
No, that's okay. I just think that if Spencer Cox and Deidre wanted to put this to bed a long time ago, they would have done what Dr. Fleming just said. Hey, here's the votes. Take a look at them. See? But they wouldn't even do that.
Right. And real quick, Laurie, can you pull up the website real quick?
Sure.
And
And then I want to go back to asking you a question on this secret meeting.
okay.
Governor's
And
Mansion.
we'll just navigate so people can know where real
Okay.
quick where they
Perfect.
how they can get there. So go to utahcorruption.com. This is our website where you can check back frequently, because we're posting motions all the time that we are submitting. And sometimes the motions are easier to read and understand than the complaint. So you can read those and get the gist of the case. But here, join our class action. We'll have a video at the end that explains how you do it. Any donations to the legal fund, I don't make any money. I don't get anything. I'm doing this all for free because it's about freedom. It's going to go through to teach people, like use them for billboards, printing flyers. This is a grassroots movement that we're doing.
Does the 4,109, does that mean that there's over 4,000 people that have already signed on?
Yes, there's already, and anybody in the United
That's so
States can
awesome.
sign on, because Utah gets federal funding, and these people are the ones that are dictating where that money goes. So that's your tax dollars. Plus, remember, you've got a U.S. Senate seat that's a vote out there he's not elected. He's disqualified. And then this is a real quick synopsis or like summary of the meaning of the case and what it's about. So you can read that. And then if you keep going down, you'll see down to where we filed the actual documents. You can click on there and there's a complaint. There's Dr. Fleming's amicus brief. And then there's the motions that are filed. If you click there, there's several of them. And then there's a list of all these exhibits. If you keep scrolling down, there's 92 exhibits there, but this is the website. So just, you can go to utahcorruption.com and sign on to join on.
So Tracie, because you mentioned the exhibits, one of them has this like secret meeting that was held in the governor's mansion. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So that was when I realized, I think at first some of these people were just used as useful idiots. I'm sorry, but that's what they were, because I don't think they started out bad when they started out in their office. But in 2021, there was a bill ran that would have totally put a spoke into Cox and Deidre's lie that you can use the signature gathering process. It actually made it really clear that you could do convention only, but it required 2/3 to go directly to the general ballot. So it was changing the Republicans 60% to 2/3. Well, it was picking up steam and it was going to pass out of Senate. It was on its third reading. And when it's third and final reading, once it passes out, it goes to the House. And then if it passes the Senate in Utah, it typically passes in the House. So it was on its third reading and it got circled, which means paused. And then that Saturday, Governor Cox at the time, he called a special meeting. And there was Dan McKay, Kurt Bramble, Derek Brown, who was the chair, the Utah Republican Party chair. Deidre Henderson was there, the Senate President, Stuart Adams, the House Speaker, Brad Wilson at the time, and Mike Leavitt, and there was a few more. But those are your main players. And that bill died. So if that bill would have passed back in 2021, if the legislative department would have done what it's supposed to and work without interference or influence from Governor Cox, that bill would have passed and there would have been no question with Trent Staggs and Phil Lyman because they got more than 2/3 at the convention. So it would have.
So in other words, you're saying repeat behavior again.
Yep.
When they don't like the direction something's happening, they step in, stop the progress from the legitimate pathway. And all you have to do is if a bill or a statute or a law, all the same thing, has to be read 3 times to be approved before it goes to the next body. And if you stop it anywhere before then, that's the end of it. The reality was, if it had already passed through twice, it was going to pass the third time. But if you change the rules, change who shows up, vote it down, you've stopped the problem. You've rewritten the rule again. So this is behavior.
Yeah.
These people have the same behavior over and over again.
And it didn't even get brought back up. It didn't just die. It just mysteriously disappeared. Into the night.
So it was taken care of.
Yeah.
Behavior is something that you can bring up in court as an attorney. If you don't know somebody did something, what you can do is you can bring up their behavior. Why? Because the way people behave is what they do over and over and over again. So when I said earlier, don't expect these people to change their behavior if you don't address this problem now, because they're being reinforced for it. They're being positive. They're getting jobs. They're getting governorship and lieutenant governorship and all the perks that go along with it. They're getting reinforced for doing wrong. They're robbing the bank and getting money. They're going to be back for more money at the bank, or they're going to be back for another election. They have demonstrated this over and over again. There's a lot of things that you see in law, and I realize if you're not a lawyer, these are a whole set of rules. If you're not a physician, there's a whole set of rules. We all got that. Everybody who's out there working has a set of rules that you work with, that you're comfortable with, but other people are not. So just because this is law, and we use terms like amicus brief, which means friend of the court, or complaint, which means Tracie said, listen, Here's what they did. I'm going to lay it out in order for you. That's my complaint, right? Before the court. And all the motions, those are all the procedural things. Can we change the rules? Can we stop it by saying, oh, no, you shouldn't let the case be heard because, well, we don't want you to hear it. So all Tracie is asking people to do, all Jim and Laurie and their friends are asking you to do, is to sign on and make your voices heard and say, let's hear the case. You're not
Right.
telling how the case is going to turn out. This is all about let's hear the case. Let's have our day in court for the people and the people's rights.
So,
We
Dr.
already know that the people in power have theirs. How about if we give the people a chance? Go ahead, Laurie.
So, Dr. Fleming and Tracie, that you had an interesting point there. So, isn't it a conflict that you have a lieutenant governor that is handpicked by the governor to run on the same ticket, and you have no Secretary of State to independently run our elections?
Yeah, it is a conflict because she can just decide who's on that ballot. That's why that was her job, is to certify the names to each ballot, and she usurped it and created a counterfeit ballot in Utah code. She's the only one that can really create a counterfeit ballot.
It's the equivalent of the pitcher also being the umpire.
Yep.
Okay, they're all strikes. I don't care how far outside they were. There's 3 strikes, they're out. 3 strikes, they're out. 3 strikes, the inning's over. We go to my team. When you get to be the pitcher and call the strikes, which is exactly what we're talking about here, the game's rigged and the other team doesn't stand a chance unless they somehow jump in front of the ball and try and get a base on ball and keep doing that. But the reality is, I think this is a good analogy for people to see. You're sitting in the stands, you paid to come watch the baseball game, and the pitcher is the umpire. And you're with the visiting team.
Yep.
Do you have any comments on that, Jim? I think he's muted.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I think the hard part for me with all this is it wasn't just that they used SB54 to circumvent the caucus system, that the people in charge of the election were the ones doing it and benefiting from it. But when the rightful candidate, let's say just for the governor, not John Curtis's race, but just for Phil Lyman got 67% and change, almost 68%, right, of the vote. They went to Deidre, who's running the election for herself, and said, I would like to be a write-in candidate. So Deidre said, okay, you can be a write-in candidate. Just tell your supporters to write in Lyman. Okay, that's easy. We'll know the intent. It says Lyman. And then Deidre put not 1, but 2, her and her son, who my understanding was a telemarketer working out of her basement, as governor and lieutenant governor, both named Lyman, which meant all of those write-in votes would be canceled by the people running the election, because they would say, well, I have no idea which Lyman, because they just all wrote Lyman in. And then, of course, Phil had to go to court and ask the court to say, listen, I don't think they're actually running a campaign, which they did. And they both dropped out. And then KSL, because they're awesome, they ran a newspaper article that said, or a story that basically said Lyman dropped out, and put a picture of Phil Lyman. Then 3 paragraphs down, it said, oh, not Phil Lyman, the other 2 Lymans dropped out.
Yeah.
But these are the people
It's
running
very
our and benefiting from it.
Yeah, and it's very, very childish. And they're making wads of cash. I mean, if people wonder why they do this, it's because they make a ton of money. They're taking your tax dollars. That's why your taxes are skyrocketing, and they're giving it to their buddies, and they're benefiting from their families.
So let's unpack this a little bit further. So Dr. Fleming, what was the importance? You've talked about this amicus brief, friend of the court, but what was the importance for you to write it?
Well, there were two amicus briefs that I wrote. The first one simply said, listen, I realize that there's a lot of activity going on behind the scenes in the legal system of Utah, trying to not even hear this case. And so the first amicus brief is simply stating, listen, there's enough credible information in the complaint, in the original statement of facts that Tracie submitted, to say, please, courts, give us a case. Let us prove our case in court. Let the defendants prove their case in court. But let's at least do it the way that the founding fathers said we should, which is when we have disputes, and particularly when there's questions about the political system, who's supposed to intervene? Courts are supposed to come in and say, is it being done legally? So the first amicus brief was, listen, I'm not telling you how to decide this. I'm just simply stating an objective observer who has enough legal knowledge to know whether there's information here is telling you on the record that you should hear this case, period. The second one was filed because I just get tired of people cheating. The reality is you can't play the law. You can play the law both ways and get by with it if the people won't hold you accountable.
Right.
And
Tracie's trying to hold them accountable, and she's begging you. I mean, this is, listen, hand in hand. And by the way, if you think I'm getting any money off this, no, I don't. Not a penny, and they don't even make those anymore. The reality here is laws like SB54 and the behaviors that are going on are being played depending upon who can win them. Mm-hmm. And if you're the one in power and their behavior is shown that they will manipulate, they'll change the rules, they'll hold sessions for laws at unusual times to bury bills, they will not show you the signatures to support that they're right, which would be the easiest thing for them to do, right? I mean, that would have, imagine, this has been going on for the better part of a year now, right? Imagine how embarrassed they could make people like Jim Gagan by showing him all the signatures, right? And I have to imagine they're kind of tired of you being a thorn in their side, or at least talking about it and talking to other people, and yet nobody's there to pull the thorn out of their side. I can only imagine that's because it's a legitimate thorn and they don't have anything to support themselves in reality.
So, Dr. Fleming, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Before we get on to showing a PowerPoint that Tracie had put together. So I've read your brief. I had to research some of the words because I don't,
it's the briefest brief I've ever written in my life.
Well, it was good. So, but your brief raises concerns that Utah officials may have, and this is my word, may have weaponized SB54 and the RICO case that rigged the election and buried dissenters like Trent Staggs, who got almost 70% of our votes, and Phil Lyman, who got over 67% of our votes. If discovery uncovers emails or recordings proving that Governor Cox personally orchestrated the fraud, And if you had any say, which obviously we know you don't, but this is just a question figuratively, would you call for federal indictments?
Um, so you're right. I don't have any say.
Your opinion matters, though.
So I think clearly, I mean, good grief, what century are we in? I think clearly that when government officials do something illegal, they should be held accountable. Now, in the legal term, that's called an indictment. You get the evidence together, you take it to a grand jury, you present it to them. We don't even play this fair in the United States, where the defendant gets to defend themselves before the grand jury. I mean, this is just all, here's the evidence that shows they did something wrong. And you know, I think that if they in fact did break these laws, then yes, they should be indicted. I think it is two-faced for the American public, no matter what state they're in, to say we want honest officials, and then to know that they're breaking the law and not hold them accountable.
Okay.
They've had over a year to say, maybe we should, this isn't hard to do. Maybe I shouldn't have done it that way. Maybe the next time around we shouldn't do it that way. Jim, I don't know where the signatures are. I don't know who ended up with them. I'll do my best to try to find them, but I don't always have the last say. I mean, you could come up with a whole bunch of things that an honest person would say if you were an honest person.
Well, but
The
think
problem
about
is
it.
that dishonest people are not honest people. Go ahead, Tracie.
Think about it. It's common sense. Common sense thinks, I just won a nomination at convention, the party's nomination. There is an actual code that says I can use this convention, but somebody gets to go, nope, I get a second chance.
Yeah, they're playing pitcher and umpire at the same time.
Like right then, when I found that out in 2022, I go, wait, they do what? That makes no sense at all. Yeah. So common sense right there says that's illegal, but they don't care. They just do it anyways.
And for those of you who are football fans, that's playing quarterback and the umpire at the same time. Okay. I mean, whatever sport you have to.
I have a question for you, Tracie. My understanding of the lawsuit is, because you're asking people to join this as a class action, it doesn't cost them anything. It's just that they're saying, yeah, we want to hear this. We want a court to decide. Mm-hmm. My understanding is there's basically 4 things you're asking for, and you tell me if I'm off base. The first thing would be to block the second chance system, where Utah, to stop Utah from applying election law in a way that lets convention losers come back onto the ballot by signature when the party rules say they shouldn't.
Yeah. The
second thing that you're asking is to declare certain election results invalid. To argue that the offices held by these people who got there using the disputed system, including the governor, lieutenant governor, and others, are not legitimate and should be declared vacant.
Yep.
The third thing was to install different office holders. In other words, you're asking that the preferred candidates, the ones that won with 60+1 vote at the convention, be placed in those offices and also automatically be treated as the party's nominees for 2026. Is that right?
Yeah, because equitable relief and the Utah.
I think you're not asking them to be placed in the offices, though.
No, we're going to have an election. It would be held in 2026 because the Utah state constitution, it has rules to say what happens if that office becomes vacant during the middle of the term. And it tells you what you're supposed to do. And it says you hold another election in the general election, which is next year. And then those people elected would carry out the rest of the term. I ask for equitable relief and to say, start back from because everybody's been harmed. Start back from the convention results, because this isn't just a Utah Republican Party issue. The Democrats got screwed too, and so did the Utah Constitution. They want the real candidate. They were going up against incumbents, or in John Curtis's race, somebody that has millions of dollars to just go out there and clobber you.
Tracie, just for clarification for the people listening, you're not asking people to sign on to this website to join this class action, to agree with those conclusions. You're asking them to sign on to simply state, we want the case to be heard. Okay?
Right.
So they don't have to agree with any of those points you just said. They just simply have to agree with the idea that, you know, something here doesn't seem like it followed the rules the way it was supposed to be done, and we want the evidence presented to a court to find out, did everybody play by the rules or didn't they? And if they didn't, then we'll go the next step to deal with how we address with that. And if they did, so be it. But at least for the honest citizens who want the country to be honest and the state of Utah to be honest and the courts to be honest, you're asking them to sign on to say, we want this heard because we believe there's evidence that a big wrong was done to all of us, in that our vote and our ability to choose and elect who's going to represent us, that is constitutionally our right, was taken from us. Correct?
Yeah, well, it is a class action. So the people are joining, they are going to say they've been harmed. Like, they have been harmed because their federal tax dollars are getting used by these people that weren't even there.
Right. So but that's different than what's the final conclusion that the court will make. It is, we feel we've been harmed. Our rights have been taken from us. They didn't follow the rules. Everything that we have been told since we were born about voting and how it's done, and it's honest and it's legitimate, and they won't come in and be both the quarterback and the referee, or the pitcher and the umpire at the same time, that even these people have to play by the rules the way the rules are set up. That just because they're politicians, there's not a special set of laws for these folks. They have to, acknowledge our rights as U.S. citizens and Utahns voting, right?
Right. And, and
I think
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think when you look at Lieutenant Governor Henderson, she should have brought the receipts, and she didn't. She said instead, doubt the doubters, and we're a gold standard of integrity in elections. But when asked about it, they just ignored the voters.
Right. It was just all a facade. The signature gathering process didn't count. It didn't apply to them. And so it was just all motions, because they knew that they're the ones that are going to win. They knew we're going to pick ourselves. We'll just act like this is a real election and do a song and dance. And, we'll use signature gathering. Yeah, we can use that. We're real. Because that's what the whole case is about, is a RICO case. What happened is she created a counterfeit ballot, and then she put it in the mail. When she placed those names on there that were disqualified, she had no authority. I don't care if they gathered signatures, because the Utah Republican Party does not use signature gathering. And there is a law that says you cannot construe that law to actually violate the internal proceedings of a party. So she's breaking the law. She knows she's breaking the law, and she doesn't care. And so then they took to the social medias, and to earn your vote and to earn Utahns' vote, they wanted to make it look like they were legitimate candidates when they weren't. They never were. They were disqualified at the convention. No signature gathering process applies. And then they frauded the fraud at that anyways. But that is wire fraud. When somebody takes to wire and sends emails and they're wanting your vote, that is something very valuable. And so they're earning your vote that way, making you think that they're legitimate candidates when they weren't. That's wire fraud. And there you've got your RICO. And then you have the conspiracy of it. You have the people that are trying to stifle dissent. So like me, they tried to arrest me when I said the law doesn't apply that way. You need to stand up and say, no, you can't do that. Instead, they tried to stifle my speech by having me arrested. And so if you have a executive department that's willing to cheat, a judicial department that's willing to protect it because they unlawfully dismissed Phil Lyman's petition challenging the primary results, and if you have a legislative department that won't do anything, you pretty much can do whatever you want. And that's what Utah has right now. And so the United States government promised us a representative form of government. We don't have it. And that's why we did a motion to join them as a plaintiff.
Okay.
It's more fundamental than that, Tracie. The United States government didn't guarantee what you just said. The states had to say, we agree with what you're telling us we need to have in our states to become a state of the United States of America. Okay. This is a covenant agreement with the states and the federal government.
Well,
so
Article
the state
4
of Utah had to turn around to the federal government and say, we agree to hold elections in the way that you state we must hold elections so that we can become the state of Utah in the United States. Okay, that's more fundamental, I think, to the issue of what's happening in Utah. The state broke its covenant with the federal government. That brings the federal government in directly because the federal government has been damaged in that it made the agreement, Utah, you want to become a member of the United States, these are the rules, and yet, Utah lied is what it amounts to. And so if you're a citizen in the state of Utah right now, you should be wondering if the federal government of the United States ever figures out that Utah lied and didn't keep its promise when it signed on as a state and didn't solve the problem itself, there could be some real ramifications for the state of Utah. And I think we currently live in an environment where those types of ramifications might come back to bite the state of Utah.
Yeah. And that leads into a lot of people saying, well, this case has already been heard. SB54 has been heard. And that's why I want to talk about the dissenting opinion in all that in those cases.
So we'll pull up the PowerPoint.
Yeah, because the party was the one that sued, and so there was really no constitutional harm because the law did not require that the signature gathering be forced upon the party. The law never said that, so that's why they kept saying there's nothing wrong with this law, if SB54. Plus, it had been further changed. But Justice Timkovich could see how it was being applied, but he's like, well, it's not right because it was the party that sued. The party wasn't the one that's being harmed. It's actually the application harming the members of it and then everybody in Utah. And so then go to the next slide, if you will. That he almost predicted what would happen the way that they applied this application and the signature gatherer. He says it's very real. Like neighborhood caucus meetings are a communitarian affair and with shared prayer, competition, and delegate slots. So he talks about how this is going to change this whole tight-knit community into a loosely affiliated collection of individuals. And that's what it has done. If you are my senator knows who I am. I'm a delegate. He knows who I am. But if he knows that he can circumvent, because if I want to unseat him because of his shenanigans that he's did, like he passed the new state flag, he's done a couple other terrible bills. If I wanted to unseat him, I could go at convention, I could rally the people and tell them what he's been doing, and everybody in that district Senate district could unseat him with a more conservative person, because you've got the power to the people. Right now, if you have $1 million, just go gather signatures and they'll just change the result of the convention process. So he really did do a good job. And go to the next slide, if you will. So he talks about how it's going to change who actually comes out of who the party was actually wanting. So when he says nominees and nominee positions other than those the party would choose is left to its own devices. That means that the party picks its nominee through the convention process. That's our process. That's who we had come out of the convention process. And now we are stuck with somebody that we don't even want to associate with. Like Cox would have never been our pick. So he
got
really
booed
talks
off
about
the
it.
stage and couldn't even come back the second time.
Yeah, he got booed off because we've seen what he's been doing, especially during COVID. He stole all that COVID money.
He walked off stage and sent proxies up for the other votes at the convention, because he knew he was going to collect signatures, and he knew that it didn't matter. He would be the nominee.
Yeah, he didn't need us. And so the next slide, I don't even know how many slides I put together, but he's like predicting what's going on. This is a 2018 dissenting opinion from Justice Timkovich. He says that we're going to have to associate with an unwanted candidate. We didn't want Cox. That was not how our party chooses our nominee. And it even said, he talks about as long as the person has by fame and fortune. Yeah, if you're rich and everybody knows that your name, I mean, they have their own cameras that follow them around now, and they pay this company to do their videos for them and make them sound so great, and they push this propaganda. So if you have that stuff, you can beat the system. And I think the next slide, what's the next slide?
And going back to the COVID money, he should make record of where it is.
Yeah, there's another guy out there that has been exposing that he's been giving money to his own family. Spencer Cox gave like $27 million to his own family. They own Cox Enterprise, and it's this telecommunication company.
But when you say give money, you're saying contracts.
Yeah, through contracts. They're like, there's no big contracts. And then it says the judge even predicts that it's going to be divisive within the party ranks. Can you tell me how divided this party is? I mean, I have a friend right now going through some crap just because they're attacking her because she is Phil Lyman's supporter, and they are attacking her. It's so divided because you've got the elitists and the regular people that want just free and fair elections. And you've got the elitists that say, no, we know which candidates work best because they're going to run our state with it. And then the final thing I want to show, I think the next slide is, oh no, there's one more. So he even says fueling in party strife. But this final slide, it's HB48. And I think a lot of people don't know about it. It's in the 2016. That is what took the ability of signature gathering away.
Tracie, what does HB mean for our listeners?
House bill. And so
Okay,
House
thank
bill is what the legislature runs. And they had to run this bill because the judge had determined that the unaffiliated voting in your primary was unconstitutional. So that took the primary back to a closed primary. And that means that the Utah Republican Party can pick its nominees the way it wants to. But the way they're applying the law is unlawful, first of all, and unconstitutional. So when you talk about indictments, this civil case is just opening the door, in my opinion.
Okay.
So that's all I wanted to go over, is to remind the people that they didn't even have the authority to use signature gathering, and they did.
So before we go to the final, where we're going to walk people through how to sign on so that they can make sure that their voice is heard, is what Dr. Fleming was saying. Jim, Dr. Fleming, do you have anything before we go into showing people how to sign on? And Tracie, you know, one more thing. You mentioned RICO a few times. Can you just explain RICO, what it means, just one more time for our listeners?
It's racketeer, influence, and corrupt organization. And that's exactly what we have. It's the mob. It's the mafia. You stay in, you want your preferred candidates in office so they can continue to steal your taxes, steal your money, and feed it back to their companies. Meanwhile, they're getting richer and richer and richer, while we, the people, are getting poorer and poorer because they keep upping our taxes.
And are there any other RICO cases like yours here in the United States?
Not that I know of, but Katie Hodges, I heard, is under investigation, and that's Deidre Henderson's best friend.
Oh, awesome.
Well, maybe they'll share time together. You know, it's interesting, and we haven't talked about like New Hampshire versus Maine, where the courts basically ruled that you couldn't prevent a case from being heard when there were inconsistencies in how cases were being ruled. And so the term, frequently what somebody would do is they will come up with, oh, that case has been heard somewhere else before and a court already ruled on it. And that's what judiciary estoppel, some other terms for depending upon the courts that it's in. But the function of people like me and my area in law, what I specialized in as a student was intellectual property, constitutional law, and appellate law. So that most of the time you're looking at a federal case in district court, it's where the facts are presented. And then there's a problem with how it's done, and then it goes to appellate, which is we argue procedures. Was everything done appropriately? And this is where I would argue even more so that my area of interest applies here, because the procedure and how all of this was done is what was wrong. You know, they circumvented the correct procedures for carrying through the election law and getting it done. So that's why my area of interest with that. But they can't prevent it from being heard when there's inconsistencies. In the appellate process is where you look at something and say, okay, I understand that there was this ruling, but it was in this one particular environment. But this has something different about it that makes it unique, and that's why it needs to be heard. And in this case, what has finally come to the surface is the fact that different courts are ruling in different ways, and they're applying these rules depending upon the election year in different ways. And that inconsistency means there is no rule of law. Mm-hmm. And the fundamental concept that you get, I think, almost day one when you enter law college is the rule of law. We have to have rules or it's all chaos. You know, Aristotle, law is justice free of emotion, you know. Yeah, I could argue that one. But the reality is, you have to have consistency or it's chaos. And what we've seen here is them playing, again, using my analogy, either the pitcher and umpire or quarterback and referee. They're playing the rules, they're changing the rules, they're being inconsistent. You, Utah voter, you, U.S. voter, can't win. Under these circumstances, it has been determined that it doesn't matter what you want, you can't win. You can go to the ballot box and you can do whatever you want to, but they have decided the outcome before you will ever get there. In which case, we'll quit having people show up. And if you think people don't care about politics now, they'll care even less when they realize their voice doesn't matter. This is your opportunity to have your voice matter. You're not doing this for me. You're not doing it for Tracie. You're not doing it for anybody but yourself and the people you care about. And if you let them down, you're letting yourself and the people down most important to you, not me.
And Jill Watson has a valid point. She wanted to just chime in on this, Tracie.
Well, if Jill Watson has a valid point, I would love to hear it.
I just want to say to the audience, this is very layman terms. It doesn't matter if it's Democrat, Republican, Freedom Caucus, even communist. Everybody has a right to assemble. And this whole point is anybody who nominated their people by their rules should have gone to the general ballot, period, of the story. And the people that forced this illegitimate direct primary by making the illusion of these signatures, basically they should have been write-ins. That's the whole point. They can be write-ins if they want to, but
Right.
they forced our choice. They canceled my vote. And like I said, I don't care what party you're from, you have a right to send your people to the primary. We didn't get to send our choice to the primary. And by them getting away with
To the
this,
general, to the general.
sorry, to the
Yeah.
general. And by getting away with this, the whole point which Fleming just explained to you so well, is if it cancels our vote, then it doesn't count. And if it doesn't count, it's like people will give up eventually. And this is what's so important about this case, because all we want to do, win or lose, we want it to be representative of us. That's it.
Good
Thanks.
point. So Tracie, we're going to show the video and then we're just going to come back to for one last comment. So can you show the video? Of that. Nicely done.
Yes, it's a video.
So Jim, Tracie, Dr. Fleming, any last words to our listeners?
Well, the more that join, the more pressure you have on making them do what's right. We already have clerks trying to do some shady stuff in the court system. So invite as many people as you can and join on, because the more they will behave, the more that they'll behave themselves.
And this isn't about being a sore loser at the convention. This is about having your vote canceled by the bureaucracy that runs our state.
Well, and if you talk about sore losers, it was Spencer Cox that was the sore loser because he lost. He was done.
I don't think people understand that. So Cox chooses Deidre Henderson to be the lieutenant governor who is going to referee the election. The judges in the state are appointed by Cox, and the GRAMA board that was supposed to be the transparency board that would give us things like the signatures, they're all appointed by Cox as well. And you can go back and look, but Cox over the last few years has been advocating that he also would get to appoint the attorney general. So he would effectively be the king of Utah. So it's time to stand. It's not okay to let other people do this for you. Go out, sign up. Doesn't cost you a nickel, and it's something that's super easy to do. But it lets the powers that be know that they serve the people, not the other way around.
Well said.
Dr. Fleming?
Benjamin Franklin. What form of government did you give us, doctor? A republic, madam, if you can keep it. He didn't just mean in 1776 or 1779. He meant for the duration of the country. It's a republic as long as you can keep it a republic. But once you lose the republic, you don't get it back. Winners don't surrender unless they are forced to play the game properly. Your governor, your lieutenant governor, and any of the other people that participated in this circumventing of the rules to make certain that they would be the people in power are not representatives of the people. They're not a republic. They circumvented the republic. They took from you what millions of men and women have suffered, been maimed, and died to give you. The thing that you need to do now to keep it is to make certain that your voice has been heard. You need to deliver a strong, solid message that you are not going to go quietly into that good night. You will not go quietly without a fight. You're going to do what the founding fathers and everybody else that you respect, whether it's in politics, science, religion, or any other aspect of your life, no matter who these people are that you look to as mentors and leaders that stand up for what you believe people should stand up for, these are the people that you should now be thinking about when you make a simple determination. Do you want to go on, add your name to the list, have your voice be heard, and attempt to help keep the republic a republic? Or are you going to allow it to go into the oblivion? Because Dr. Franklin knew it when he responded to the woman, a republic, madam, if you can keep it.
Well, thank you. And with that said, this is recorded. You can share it. You can go to mainstreetmediautah.com. Obviously, we'll be putting it on Tracie's site. It's on Dr. Fleming's site. And of course, you can always find us in X and on Rumble. Tracie, how do they reach out to you if they have any questions? Oh, we muted her.
You can find me on X, Tracie Halvorsen, or you can, once you submit into the case, we can reach out that way too. Also, you can find me at utahcorruption.com.
Okay. And Jim Gagan, what's your X handle? Because you've got a lot of followers.
Utah Papa on X.
All right. And Dr. Fleming?
The only thing I'd like to say before we get off is, Tracie, thank you for taking a stand for all of us in Utah.
Wow.
It's a lot of work. You're not getting paid for it. You're putting your career and everything else on the line. Shows a lot of courage.
Well, thanks.
Proud of you.
Thanks.
Thank
I
you.
like the Utah flag that you have behind you there. Is that the new one or the actual one?
It's the actual one. It's not the communist one that they rose up when they conquered us. So
All right. That's a wrap. UtahCorruption.com. Please share this video and reach out to Tracie Halvorsen if you have any questions. And as always, Dr. Fleming, it's always an honor having you on our Rumble podcast, Utah Corruption. So with that said, good night, everybody, and thank you.